The Indiana Fever walked into Los Angeles with their playoff dreams hanging by a thread. 3 losses in their last 4 games had already put pressure on this young squad. And facing the Sparks inside the loud and unforgiving Crypto.com arena meant every single possession could decide their season's fate. The final seconds didn't just test the Fever's resilience. They exposed everything fans hate about the WNBA's officiating. What unfolded in those last moments wasn't just questionable refereeing. It felt like the game itself was being stolen right in front of millions watching at home. Caitlin Clark, sitting helplessly on the sidelines in street clothes, couldn't hold back her anger. And fans online? They lit up the internet with accusations that this wasn't basketball. It was a setup. But what should have been a gritty battle between 2 teams fighting for survival turned into something else entirely. With Indiana clinging to a fragile 1-point lead, the game clock showed just 3.9 seconds left. That should have been enough time for one last possession, win or lose. But instead of a normal finish, the referees dragged those 3.9 seconds into what felt like an eternity. The clock stopped. Whistles blew. Inbounds were reset again and again. And every single time the Sparks failed to execute, somehow the officials found a way to give them another chance. But fans watching weren't just frustrated. They were furious. Social media erupted with accusations that the game was being rigged. How many lifelines does one team get? One fan posted. Caitlin Clark's body language said it all. Arms thrown up, head shaking in disbelief, as if she couldn't believe she was watching her team's season get hijacked in real time. But instead of letting time expire naturally, the referees did the unthinkable. They put 0.1 seconds back on the clock and gave Los Angeles yet another chance to inbound the ball. How can a team possibly run a real play in a 1/10 of a second? The crowd knew it, the Fever players knew it, and everyone watching from home knew it. It didn't make sense. The officials had turned what should have been the closing moment of Indiana's most important win of the season into a circus. Clips of the bizarre call went viral instantly, spreading across timelines with captions like "The WNBA refs are embarrassing the game." The most outrageous moment came with just 2.4 seconds on the clock. Kelsey Mitchell had gone to the free throw line, and when her first shot rattled out, fans assumed the game was essentially over. Through all the chaos, one player refused to break. Aaliyah Boston, the franchise cornerstone and defensive anchor, stood tall in the middle of the storm. When the Sparks tried to force it inside, Boston shut it down, snatching rebounds, contesting every look, and making sure no amount of referee interference could rip this win away. Her defensive stand in those final moments wasn't just about stats. It was about setting a tone. Not tonight. Her body language screamed. Without Boston's dominance in the paint, those extra chances might have cost Indiana everything. Instead, she delivered the kind of clutch defensive performance that reminded everyone why she's already being called the face of the Fever's future. What made this victory even more shocking is just how many key players Indiana was missing. Caitlin Clark was sidelined again, still not cleared from her groin injury. Sophie Cunningham, one of the team's most reliable scorers, wasn't available either. Sydney Colson and Arie McDonald, 2 guards who normally provide energy and ball-handling depth, were also out. And then there was Lexi Hull, who stepped onto the court with 2 swollen, blackened eyes from a brutal collision in the previous game. On paper, this should have been a disaster. Most analysts figured Indiana simply didn't have enough firepower left. But that's the beauty of sports. Sometimes the script gets ripped apart. Lexi Hull didn't just show up. She embodied what the Fever are all about. Every time she dove on the floor for a loose ball, sprinted back on defense, or spaced the floor despite her injuries, it told the world something bigger. This team wasn't gonna fold just because they were short-handed. Hull's bruised face became a symbol of Indiana's toughness. Fans couldn't stop sharing pictures of her mid-game, calling her the warrior spirit of the Fever. When you play with that much heart, even the ugliest situations, like corrupt officiating, can't break you. But the real spark came from Odyssey Sims, a veteran who's been everywhere in her WNBA career. On this night, though, she was unstoppable. Sims racked up 21 points, cutting through the Sparks' defense like it was nothing. And when the game hung in the balance, it was Sims who delivered the dagger, scoring Indiana's final 5 points and silencing the LA crowd. She wasn't just playing for stats. She was playing with purpose, composure, and the kind of poise that only experience brings. Against her former team, Sims turned into their nightmare. Kelsey Mitchell may not have had a perfect night, but her constant presence forced LA to adjust defensively all game long. Even when her shots weren't falling, she demanded so much attention that it opened up lanes for Sims and space for Boston to operate. That's leadership, shouldering responsibility when others can't. Mitchell showed that being a star isn't about perfection. It's about carrying the weight even when it feels heavy. And while fans groaned when she missed her free throws late, her relentless scoring pressure is what kept Indiana alive long enough for others to finish the job. Head coach Stephanie White deserves credit too. With so many pieces missing, her rotations weren't about star power. They were about toughness, defense, and squeezing every ounce of effort from whoever was available. White pieced together a strategy that made every possession matter. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't smooth, but it was effective. And in those moments when the referees seemed determined to hand LA the game, White's adjustments kept Indiana grounded. This was coaching under fire, and she passed with flying colors, even though she never stepped on the floor. Caitlin Clark still dominated the post-game conversation. Cameras caught her shaking her head, throwing her arms up, and mouthing disbelief at the officiating blunders. When she spoke afterward, she didn't hold back, calling out the referees for crossing a line and voicing what every fan had already been screaming online. Clark's influence is undeniable. She's the biggest star in the league, and when she calls out the officiating, it doesn't stay a one-night controversy. It becomes a league-wide debate about fairness, accountability, and whether the WNBA can protect the integrity of its own games. Caitlin Clark wasn't the only voice blasting the referees. From the sidelines, injured guard Sydney Coulson added her fire to the conversation. She called out how Kelsey Mitchell never gets the whistles she deserves, hinting that this wasn't just bad luck, it was a systemic problem. Coulson's comments resonated because she's a veteran. She's been around this league long enough to know the politics, the patterns, and the frustrations players live with every single night. When a vet speaks, people listen. And suddenly it wasn't just Clark making noise, it was the Fever as a whole, sending a message. What happened in Los Angeles didn't feel like an isolated incident. Fans have watched this movie too many times already. Strange timing decisions, soft fouls in crunch time, inconsistencies that make no sense when the stakes are highest. For many, this game was just the latest example of a disturbing pattern across the WNBA. And when fans start openly asking whether the referees are incompetent or worse, compromised, the league has a problem it can't afford to ignore. Clark's influence simply amplified what was already boiling beneath the surface. Frustration that fairness is no longer guaranteed. Within minutes of the final buzzer, social media exploded. Clips of the infamous 0.1 second inbound were everywhere, captioned with words like embarrassing, rigged, and a disgrace to the game. Fever fans weren't the only ones angry. Neutral viewers and even rival fan bases joined in, demanding accountability. The WNBA doesn't often dominate trending topics, but that night the officiating controversy had the internet on fire. And at the center of it all was Caitlin Clark. Her furious reactions turned into GIFs and memes that spread across timelines faster than highlights of the actual game. What makes this story unforgettable is that, despite everything stacked against them, the Fever still found a way to win. The refs tried to stretch the game. The Sparks had every lifeline imaginable. Indiana was missing their superstar and half their rotation. This wasn't just survival. It was a statement that Indiana isn't here to be pushed around, not by other teams, not by the referees, not by anyone. This win wasn't just another regular season result. It shifted the entire playoff picture. Sitting in 6th place, every game matters for Indiana. The Sparks were just 2 spots behind, making this matchup critical for tiebreakers and seeding. Losing under those bizarre circumstances would have been devastating. Instead, the Fever walked out with control of their own destiny still intact. And the way they won, scrapping, fighting, overcoming adversity, proved something deeper. With or without Clark, this team has an identity. And when she does return, that identity might just make them one of the most dangerous teams in the postseason. The sight of Caitlin Clark back on the court during pre-game warm-ups sent a jolt through Fever Nation. She wasn't in uniform, but she was moving, shooting, and going through drills with her teammates. For fans, it wasn't just a glimpse of progress, it was hope. Every jumper she hit during warm-ups became a clip online, with fans writing she's back even though no official word had been given. After weeks of uncertainty, those images of Clark smiling, sweating, and locked into routines reminded everyone why she changes everything when she plays. Yet for all the optimism, there's still a cloud of mystery. The Fever coaching staff refuses to commit to a return date. The front office hasn't said a word, and Clark herself is keeping things vague, brushing off questions with simple answers like "I'm feeling better every day." That secrecy drives fans crazy, but it also fuels anticipation. Will she be back before the playoffs? Will her return come in a dramatic moment when the team needs her most? Nobody knows. And in sports, uncertainty is often the greatest storyline of all. What's undeniable is that Indiana has grown tougher without her. In Clark's absence, players like Odyssey Sims, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hull have been forced to step up, take bigger roles, and learn how to win ugly. That kind of growth matters. Because when Clark finally returns, she won't be rejoining the same team she left. She'll be stepping into a group that has already proven it can fight through the worst and survive. And that makes the Fever more than just a one-star show. It makes them a complete, dangerous unit. But Clark's impact goes far beyond her points and assists. Even sitting in street clothes, her voice has shaken the league. By openly criticizing the referees, she forced everyone from fans to commentators to the WNBA itself to address the issue of officiating. That's power. That's influence. When the biggest star in women's basketball says something is wrong, the conversation doesn't die down. It spreads, it escalates, and it demands attention. Clark isn't just playing basketball anymore. She's shaping the future of the league. Sydney Colson's words added fuel to the fire, pointing out how players often feel unprotected when refs refuse to call obvious contact. Together, Clark and Colson turned this one chaotic game into a rallying cry for fairness. It wasn't whining. It wasn't excuse-making. It was a demand for accountability, and fans rallied behind it because they've seen the same problems all season long. Suddenly, this wasn't just about one win in Los Angeles. It was about the credibility of the entire league. And when fans feel like the game they love is being undermined, that's when real change starts brewing. For Los Angeles, this game should have been the night they buried Indiana's playoff hopes. They started with a 7-0 run, controlled the pace early, and had every advantage both on the roster sheet and, some would argue, from the officiating. Yet when the final buzzer sounded, they were the ones walking off stunned. Despite being handed multiple lifelines by the referees, the Sparks couldn't capitalize. The loss didn't just sting, it exposed their lack of composure in crunch time. Instead of rising to the moment, they fumbled it away. And Indiana seized it. For Odyssey Sims, this wasn't just another game. It was a personal redemption arc. Having once worn a Sparks jersey earlier in her career, she knew the building, the fans, the atmosphere. But this time, she wasn't welcomed as one of their own. And that seemed to fuel her even more. With every drive, every layup, and every clutch bucket, she silenced the very crowd that used to cheer her on. Her 21 points weren't just numbers. They were a statement that she still belongs in the spotlight. And on this night, she stole it all for herself and for Indiana. Aaliyah Boston has been labeled the future of the Fever ever since she was drafted. But nights like this show she's already the present. Her defense was suffocating, her rebounding relentless, and her composure unmatched. The Sparks threw everything at her. Double teams, physical play, constant contact. And she still controlled the paint. It wasn't just her stats. It was her presence. Every possession ran through her, whether she was scoring, screening, or protecting the rim. Boston made it clear that Indiana has a true anchor, someone you can build a championship culture around. With her face still bruised from a brutal collision days earlier, Lexi Hull became the embodiment of Indiana's toughness. Two black eyes didn't stop her from logging heavy minutes, spacing the floor, and diving for loose balls. She looked like a fighter stepping into the ring, yet she played with poise and unshakable energy. Fans on social media called her the warrior of the Fever. And it's not hard to see why. Hull's grit proved that even when Indiana is battered and short-handed, their spirit can't be broken. Kelsey Mitchell may have missed those heartbreaking free throws in the final seconds, but her impact on the game can't be overlooked. For 4 quarters, she carried the scoring load, drawing constant defensive pressure and forcing LA to adjust their schemes. Her willingness to keep attacking even when shots weren't falling created openings for Sims and Boston to thrive. That's what leadership looks like, carrying the weight even when it's heavy. Mitchell showed that she's more than just a scorer. She's a competitor who refuses to back down, no matter the situation. In the middle of the storm, head coach Stephanie White kept her team calm. The rotations weren't ideal, the lineups weren't perfect, but she found the formula to squeeze every ounce of effort out of her shorthanded roster. White leaned on defense, toughness, and discipline. Knowing style points didn't matter, survival did. When the refs seemed determined to hand LA the win, her adjustments kept Indiana steady. She didn't panic, and that composure trickled down to her players. Coaching under fire is where leaders are revealed, and White showed why she's the right voice for this team's future. This win wasn't just about Indiana surviving. It sent a message to the rest of the WNBA. The Fever aren't here to be a doormat. They aren't here to fold when things get tough. They just walked into LA, undermanned, targeted by awful officiating, and still walked out with a victory. That's not luck. That's character. And for every team in the playoff hunt, this was a warning. Underestimate Indiana at your own risk. Because if they can win games like this without Clark, imagine what happens when she returns. Even in street clothes, Caitlin Clark loomed larger than anyone else in the arena. Every reaction, every headshake, every frustrated gesture became the storyline. And when she spoke afterward, blasting the referees for inconsistency, her words carried weight far beyond one game. Clark isn't just the face of Indiana. She's the face of the league. And when she calls something out, it becomes a national conversation. Her shadow over this game proved that her influence doesn't vanish when she's injured. If anything, it grows stronger, making her return one of the most anticipated moments in basketball. Now the question lingers. When will she be back? Clips of her warming up before the game spread like wildfire. Fans convinced that her return is just around the corner. The Fever haven't given a date, but every sighting adds fuel to the fire. And with Indiana's playoff push heating up, the timing couldn't be more dramatic. This team has already proven it can fight through chaos and win ugly. Add Clark's scoring, vision, and leadership back into the mix, and suddenly the Fever aren't just a playoff team, they're a dark horse no one wants to face. When the buzzer finally sounded in Los Angeles, it wasn't just a win for the Fever. It was a symbol of everything this team represents: grit, resilience, refusal to fold under pressure, even when the odds are stacked against them. The referees tried to stretch the game into a farce. The Sparks tried to steal it, but Indiana stood firm. And with Caitlin Clark's return on the horizon, the Fever are transforming from underdogs into a nightmare matchup for anyone in their path. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think the WNBA officiating is holding the league back? Or was this just one bad night in LA? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, smash that like button if you believe in Indiana's fight, and make sure you subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next chapter of this wild season. Because if this game proved anything, it's that the Fever are only just getting started.